either one of these any good?
Wow, this is a good movie.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, well, the director from yesterday doesn't think so.
It stinks.
You sorry? You waste our film.
It's so bad. Yes, there's more happening this weekend than a big football game. We got movies. Movies coming out on the big screen. Movies coming out in IMAX. Movies coming out for home streaming as well. So let's check them out. See what's worth seeing. This is the Screening Room Podcast, and welcome to it. She is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we are from maddwolf.com. That is MADDWOLF. Let's start with a horror comedy. We're always up for those. For the past several years, the Heart Eyes Killer has wreaked havoc on Valentine's Day by stalking and murdering romantic couples. This Valentine's Day, no couple is safe. Heart Eyes.
For the past 2 years, a masked maniac known as the Heart Eyes Killer has stalked,
hunted,
and brutally slain couples on Valentine's Day.
With no motive yet uncovered.
This is more than just murder. He's like Cupid with a kink.
We're being chased by a serial killer. He's gonna keep killing people. We end it here.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy V-Day!
Get killed, all right. What was...
Why would he say that?
This is the latest from director Josh Rubin, who did Scare Me a couple of years ago and then followed that up with Werewolves Within, which is they're both very fun.
Very fun.
And he has a specific vibe because they're horror comedies always, and there's something very goofy and endearing about them, and this as well.
Yeah, and that is right in line with one of the co-writers here, well, a couple of the co-writers, Christopher Landon and Michael Kennedy.
Right.
They have that vibe. You've probably seen movies such as Happy Death Day, Freaky. Which we like very much.
Yeah.
Very similar
It's
vibe.
A Wonderful Knife.
Very similar vibe. Mm-hmm. Fun, and also some blood in there, too.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely rated R. I mean,
for sure.
There is some real violence, although the film is never scary at all because it follows exactly the beats of a romantic comedy. You know, there's a meet cute. There's a young woman, Olivia Holt, and she is about to probably lose her job because of a terrible decision that she's made in a marketing campaign that she finds out on Valentine's Day. And just as she finds this out, she meets the super handsome Jay, played by Mason Gooding. They meet at the coffee shop, but then she has to run because she has to go to this big meeting where she thinks she's going to get fired. No, the company has brought in who? Jay to salvage this marketing campaign. And so she doesn't like him because he's trying to take her job and he likes her. He just does. And so it's one of these reluctant duo and they're adversaries, but you can tell right away they're going to wind up together. And it follows that exact beat. But the sort of hijinks that they fall into is this serial killer that targets couples has targeted them. Even though they're not a couple. And so that's a lot of the comedy is they keep saying, don't kill us, we're not even together, even though they are actively laying on top of each other because one of them fell on the other or whatever. They're clearly very much going to be a couple at some point. And those are all really very fun. It's a fun movie.
Yeah, because just like in all romantic comedies, we know where it's going. We know who's going to end up together. The point is how you get there. So they're having fun with that genre and also spilling some blood.
Yeah, and at the same time, I suppose with most horror films, the point is to figure out who is the killer. And so that's kind of what this is as well. It's combining those two, inevitable outcome kind of films. And I think it works for the most part. The romantic comedy angle of it works better, honestly, than the horror angle of it. And then it just kind of goes on for too long so that the final big climax is just not all that satisfying. Yeah. But it is a fun, especially if you kind of hate Valentine's Day. It's a pretty fun. It's a consistently fun film.
Yeah, and it can't rise to the level of, say, a Tucker and Dale or some of the all-time
or
greats.
even Freaky.
Yeah, and also I think Werewolves Within had a little bit of that as far as bringing it home in the final act. Really fun, really fun. Recommend it, but just a little bit limping over the finish line,
Agreed.
I guess. But you're right. A lot of people have fun not liking Valentine's Day.
Yep.
So here's something you can kind of go out and have fun celebrating it in a way, but still not. And if you're a big horror fan and recall some Valentine's Day horror films like what's the one in the cave, in the mine, Bloody Valentine. Yeah, and then they remade that as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a lot there to like. I mean, horror comedies, we always like them.
Always.
I know some people aren't down for that. They like their horror and their comedy.
Exactly.
But if you're in for a horror comedy, you can have some fun with that for this weekend and Valentine's Day weekend. That is out in the theaters now, and it's called Heart Eyes. Well, let's do an action comedy next in theaters. A realtor is pulled back into the life he left behind after his former partner in crime resurfaces with an ominous message. With his crime lord brother also on his trail, he must confront his past and the history he never fully buried. This is called Love Hurts.
Marvin Gable.
Who are you?
Your brother brought us in to find you after you let Rose go.
Tell my brother to back off.
This little spider monkey ninja got hopped. Ay, what the?
Rose?
Hey, Marv.
Why did you come back?
If we're gonna stop your brother, I'm gonna need to hold you.
I'm so sorry.
Find my brother and Rose now!
Now let's finish this together.
You want the old me? You got him.
It's about damn time.
Sorry, brother. Love hurts.
This is one of those movies that's trying to be sort of a nobody, right? Not just that, a particular set of skills, but just really has moved on to a very humdrum life and doesn't want to be pulled back into the old life.
And somebody that you don't think to look at them would be an ass kicker.
Right.
A real badass. Because, and you're right, nobody is the one that really comes to mind with Bob Odenkirk.
Mm-hmm.
And then that movie came out, you're like, damn!
Yeah. And this one is Ke Huy Quan. And the thing about this one that makes it different is that, so he has left this life behind and now he's a realtor. And what he loves more than anything is just putting people in their dream homes.
Yeah.
And he also is really believable in that. It's not like in Nobody where he was clearly unhappy in this life that he's leading. Ke Huy Quan, he seems to really, really love what he's doing. And he bakes cookies and he says nice things. And he just got, Realtor of the Year from his boss, and he's really, really happy. And so for that reason, it kind of sets the movie in this weird space where when the love of his life, Ariana DeBose, resurfaces and needs him to go back to his ass-kicking ways to help her out of a jam, you're like, I don't think I want him to. And the thing, too, is that the movie doesn't seem to really want him to, so that when it ends up where you know it's going to end up, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, and there's also, when you say action comedy, the action, I think, sometimes has its knees cut out a little bit by all the talking. And then the comedy, when it's not that funny, both of those are kind of a problem.
Yeah, it's definitely not actually funny. So that is a big handicap that it has. The action is pretty fun. It goes on for too long. Each of the action sequences goes on for too long. And then eventually you're like, okay, why doesn't somebody just shoot him? Like, surely you have guns. But it's the talking, you're right. It's that there's such a convoluted backstory and they just keep telling you what it is in voiceover or in these just long scripted scenes for no good reason. It's just, there's just too, and the truth of it is that this convoluted backstory, it doesn't gel with the film that we're watching because Ariana DeBose returns. She sends everybody a Valentine. But the truth is that she didn't need to do any of those things because in the end, you realize that she's brought in kind of a third party and they could have just taken care of all it for her. And she certainly, at no point does she require the help of Ke Huy Quan's character. she just messes things up for everybody. So it's a sloppy, not well constructed, not that well executed, unfortunate vehicle for two very recent Oscar winners.
Yes, exactly. Two very recent Oscar winners. Also in the cast, you've got Cam Giganette. There's a Cam Giganette sighting. Also Sean Astin. Marshawn Lynch, former football star who's breaking into more movies and commercials now. He seems to be a lot of places all at once. And this is the directing debut for Jonathan Eusebio,
who I think was a long-time action. He might have been a stuntman and action coordinator.
Yeah, Fall Guy did stunts.
So this, you can see that in this. That's really where
I think he also may
inspiration
have worked on Nobody, since we've been talking about that. But yeah, a stunt guy moving into directing for this one, and it's just misses the mark.
Yeah,
I think for both action and comedy, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, these two people, great. Recent Oscar winners.
Let's get them both something better to do.
And well-deserved, yeah.
And I just have to point it out. You don't ever really think to yourself that they're going to be a couple because he's absolutely old enough to be her father. And I say that because he's my age and she's the age of our son, essentially. She's very close to the same age. So, and at the end, you're like, I still just don't see these two as a couple.
Yeah, and that is in theaters starting this weekend. It's called Love Hurts. Also in theaters, getting a wider release this weekend, an Oscar nominee from last year. This is a mother forced to reinvent herself when her family's life is shattered by an act of arbitrary violence during the tightening grip of a military dictatorship in Brazil, 1971. It's I'm Still Here.
Não precisa sorrir.
Por que não?
O editor pediu. Uma foto menos feliz.
Ele quer triste. Nós vamos sorrir. Sorriam.
This stars Best Actress nominee Fernanda Torres in the lead here, and it's very well deserved. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she is. She's amazing. And it's a really well-made film because so often in a movie you see this very sort of shorthand, the family loves each other, and it's a setup to make the tragedy of the second act hit harder, but this is so authentic.
Yeah.
It's so just big and sweeping and believable. Every family member seems to have genuine interaction with every other family member, and it works because when the tragedy hits in the second act, you really are left kind of reeling from it.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of us realized, maybe that's on us, that it's based on a true story.
Right.
Of Rubens Paiva. And I think the screenplay is also based on maybe his book or some writings that he did.
It's his son. His son.
Oh, I'm sorry.
His son, who's a character in the film,
yes.
is a famous, apparently, Brazilian writer. And as Eunice, his mother, faced dementia, he began to write their story to capture her memories before they were gone. And this is based on that.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. The director is Walter Sayas, and Eunice is played by Fernanda Torres. And that's when the movie shifts. It's based on her reaction, how she has to carry on after he is taken into, quote, custody by the military dictatorship, the authorities in Brazil in 1971, and then his disappearance. And she has to reinvent herself. She has to keep the family together and at the same time continue to dig for closure. I mean, she's also brought into custody for a while.
Yeah.
And then she has to dig for closure as the years go on. What happened? And that's one of the questions that does get answered toward the end of the movie. Why does she have to just keep going on as the decades go on, fight for this truth,
right?
To find out why, which is very important. That's a lesson for the movie and very relevant to today. But so she propels it with an incredible performance. All the performances are good. It does. It feels very real, very lived in with this family and how they have to. Once this happens, they're under watch too, and they know it, and they have to walk on eggshells, what they're doing, who they're talking to, who they can trust, and it's tense as well.
And you know what? I also appreciate that it's very realistic in that at the same time that she's, obviously incredibly distraught over where is her husband? Is he coming home? What has happened to him? She cannot pay for anything because it's 1970 and she can't take money out of the bank without her husband's signature.
Right.
And so what are they going to do? They have 5 children, she can't pay her rent. It's and I love, they don't belabor that point, but it's a real serious issue that didn't just, of course, happen to this woman. I mean, the disappeared in Brazil during this regime they were in the thousands of people.
Yeah, they don't belabor anything,
No.
which is great, which is always a plus. It's so well done, and it's one of those, I guess you could call it a surprise, an out of left field, a bit of a nomination, but it's one that is deserved, and it's great that it'll get more eyeballs on this performance and on this film.
Exactly.
Very much so. And for those of you like us who weren't aware of the particulars of the true story, in the end, it catches you up with what happened, and it's very touching, and it's very heartfelt, and a big recommendation. Obviously, a foreign language film, an international film, Oscar nominee, called "I'm Still Here," getting a wider release this weekend. Next, a music documentary in theaters in IMAX. The film traces the journeys of the 4 members of the Stairway to Heaven rockers through the music scene of the 1960s and their meeting in the summer of 1968, culminating in 1970. It's Becoming Led Zeppelin.
You could tell it was going to be a good group, but people wouldn't even book the band.
We knew something was in the air. I could feel it around me.
Everybody said, "You're mad. You're completely crazy." But I knew this was going to be the way to go.
It was an electric atmosphere. And that had been what I'd been waiting for.
We knew that we were on the right track. I wanted it to be something that they hadn't heard before.
The first time we played together, it was stunning. It was like a gift from heaven, wasn't it?
This is the first authorized by the band documentary about Led Zeppelin, and apparently, from what I've heard, has been out there for 2 or 3 years.
Trying to find distribution. Yeah,
it's kind of surprising to me, as popular as Led Zeppelin is. But yeah, it is in IMAX. The co-writer and director is Bernard McMahon. And this is one that I think will appeal more to real serious Led Zeppelin fans than casual fans. It does get pretty deep. It's a little bit over 2 hours. And it only goes up to, it's not a complete biography because it only focuses on, as you might guess from the title, the forming of the band, and then through the first 2 albums, which really then, after that second album, they were pretty much on top of the world.
Right.
It's one of the biggest rock bands in the world. But it has new interviews with Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones. They're separate interviews. They all look like they are maybe in the same room. They're sitting in these incredibly ornate chairs. They look like some sort of royalty sitting there, but they're separate interviews. And at the same time, you get, the drummer John Bonham, who passed away in 1980, didn't give hardly any interviews at all. But this movie features what the movie says is a never before heard interview with John Bonham, and so they play excerpts from that throughout the movie. And it certainly looks like the other members are listening to those excerpts as we listen to them, from the looks on their faces. And maybe that happened, maybe it didn't, but it's kind of sweet as John Bonham is talking about things that happened and his remembrances of each of them as band members and friends. So that is nice. And you see some great early footage. I mean, there's a real early piece of film of Jimmy Page when he was young in his first band, and then all these childhood pictures, and then that doesn't go on too long until they meet and then they form the band. They came out of the Yardbirds breaking up and then on their way to superstardom. So it's definitely one that Led Zeppelin fans do not want to miss. But because it is authorized, then you know that you're not going to have a lot of flaws. And they're not going to dig into the dark stuff of the band, which they do not do. But again, this is not a narrative film. It's a documentary, and it lives up to its title of Becoming. It's how they got together. There are some questions that maybe, I wish they could have dug into that a little bit more. But, of course, there's great music in there and gives you a sense of how they feel now looking back on their legacy. So, yeah, definitely would say more for the hardcore fans than for casual fans. But if you really like the Led Zeppelin, do not miss, especially in IMAX, Becoming Led Zeppelin, which is out now. will stay in theaters for an Irish film, a drama, a thriller. An Irish sheep-herding family thrust into battle on several fronts: internal strife, hostility within the family, rivalry with another farmer, paternalism, heritage, and the generational trauma cycle through the cultural prism of Ireland. It's Bring Them Down.
Hey! What's this? These are the two animals you told me were dead. You want them? Come get them.
What happened?
Rustlers. Attacked my flock. We'll offer him thousands for one animal, but will he sell?
Gonna go live with Michael.
What you gonna do? Kill me like you killed your mommy?
Michael, stop!
Told you to kill them. He shouldn't have.
How can you do it, Michael?
Sure know what they say. We're just livestock. There's dead stock.
This is a couple of our favorites. Barry Keoghan, who is one of our all-time favorites, one of the greatest actors working today, and also Christopher Abbott, who's really very good, has made a couple of missteps his last two films, so I was excited to see him in this cast.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was just wrestling with wolves, and now he's wrestling with sheep, and the bloodlines still get bloody. And yeah, his intensity plays well in this movie, because I'll tell you, this is grim. This is not a lot of smiles, if any, in this movie. I mean, there are some moments of dark comedy, but I mean, it's dark. This one is a grim, desolate piece of work by co-writer and director Chris Andrews. And it's in the countryside of Ireland, which is really photographed and framed well, but they're so far out there that it's foreboding as well, and it really lends a sense of place and a sense of mood, because you've got these two families. And you've got, on one hand, you've got Christopher Abbott and his ailing father, played by Colm Meaney. They're on one side, and then on the other, I guess they're neighbors, you could say, and that is Barry Keoghan, and then his father, played by Paul Reedy. And they're the Keeleys, and then Christopher Abbott and his dad, they're the O'Sheas, and they share a grazing hill for their sheep. And you can already tell that relations are not really neighborly, but okay, because years ago there was a tragedy in the village that Christopher Abbott was involved in, and also at the time he was seeing the woman who went on to become Barry Keoghan's mother. So there's all this unspoken kind of tension there, and then it really comes to a head when Christopher Abbott finds out that Barry Keoghan and family, they are basically trying to steal and pass off a couple of rams that were the O'Sheas as Keeley rams. They said, Barry Keoghan says, I found them dead in the hills and I just got rid of them, so there's no proof there. And then Christopher Abbott finds out, no, you're trying to sell them as your own. So that's really kicks off this feud that just escalates, and it lets the film use metaphor and then use actual story beats to examine this cycle of trauma and trying to get past your mistakes and forgiving yourself. But it's pretty effective in doing it. I mean, these actors are very good, as you said.
Yes.
And the rest of the cast, also including the actress playing Barry Keoghan's mother, Nora Jane Noon from The Descent. She was in The Descent years ago.
Yes, she was.
She's very good, too. So it's a pretty small cast. The film alternates between the English and Irish languages. It's funny because when I was starting to watch it, and I had the subtitles came on, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to leave these on because sometimes the brogues can be a little bit much. But you need them because then they do go into speaking Irish. Yeah. So very authentic there. Very, very authentic. Obviously, Barry Keoghan alone. But so the performances ground this. And then in the third act, it takes a curious turn where you suddenly start having time shifts, and it rewinds back to show you different angles of previous events. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it seems like the filmmaker was searching for that last narrative thread to make this really memorable, and it's just not quite there. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is good stuff. I mean, I was caught up in it. I was engrossed in it, but then you just need that one more to the something to the characters, a little more character development to really, really make it stick, and it's just not there yet. But I think a lot of potential for this filmmaker. I believe his debut, Chris Andrews, as a co-writer and a director. But he's certainly on the right track. He's got an eye for casting for sure, for framing, and for sense of place. I think in the future, probably get a little bit more into character development. Then you might have something really memorable. But still, I would recommend it. But it's grim. Did I say that? I mean, be ready, because there's not a lot of happy-go-lucky moods in this one, but definitely some good performances. It's called Bring Them Down, and it's in theaters now. And one more, a comedy on Netflix. When Lainey's plan to settle down and start a family falls apart, she puts on a fake baby bump, tells a lie, and accidentally falls for her dream guy. This is Kinda Pregnant.
The most important relationship you're ever going to have is with yourself.
For being a stupid tit-faced jerk butt. Oh, it is you, my friend, that has the face of a tit.
Can you two bitches calm down? You can't even come up with proper fucking swear words at this point.
How far along are you, judging by your facial bloating? 5 months?
I'll break your fucking neck.
What was that? I've been a freaking wreck. I would be too if my ankles were that big.
Even though Amy Schumer hasn't made many great films since Trainwreck, which is a great film.
So good.
I always am optimistic. I think, okay, maybe this is the one.
Yeah,
this is not the one.
You go back to her stand-up special, so funny.
Inside Amy Schumer is one of the greatest TV shows
funny.
that there ever has been.
Trainwreck, great. And he's just kind of been waiting. And unfortunately, this is not there. And I know right now it's getting just savaged.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
But it's not good.
It's not good. It's not The Wrong Missy bad. And I bring that up for two reasons. Because that's still one of the worst comedies I've ever seen in my life. And it was directed by the same guy, Tyler Spindell. So it's better than that. It's another Happy Madison production. So a lot of times, unfortunately, as good as Adam Sandler can be, those Happy Madison productions can be so lazy, where he's just putting people like Rex Ryan and Tony Orlando in these supporting roles. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Just so they can have fun, I guess. So it's not that bad, but it's not that good either. And it seems, the thing about it seems so recycled, a lot from Trainwreck.
Right.
Even from the beginning, because the opening setup is a flashback to Amy Schumer's character and Jillian Bell's character. She's another great one.
Yeah, exactly.
Love seeing Jillian Bell.
I mean, somebody should be able to make a great movie with those two stars.
Those two are great. So the opening is a flashback to them as kids playing with dolls, sort of how Trainwreck opened
with her and her sister.
Yeah, and in that one she got the lesson about monogamy is a lie or whatever, and in this one she gets sort of a similar lesson about childbirth and about having kids, and so right away you're kind of on the same track, and then as it goes along and she gets into this ridiculous lie because she thinks that her boyfriend Damon Wayans Jr. is going to propose. He's got something to propose. He's proposing a threesome. That's what he's proposing. And so they end up breaking up, and then through these convoluted situations, she puts on this baby bump, and then things keep happening that she has to keep up the lie. She meets new people. She meets a pregnant woman who becomes a good friend of hers, and then she meets this guy who's very promising, played by Will Forte, who's sort of the same as the character in Bill Hader.
Exactly.
In that one, he was a bit of a shy guy, not a ladies' man, and he didn't care that she was so promiscuous.
Right.
In this one, another guy, kind of a little bit quirky, and he doesn't care that she's pregnant. So they just keep very familiar, very familiar. And then you've got this other side character played by Ursula Carlson, who's very reminiscent of the old roles that Rebel Wilson used to play before she lost all her weight. Just some heavier person come in and just say these outlandishly rude and uncalled for things. You've got that character too. So a lot of it is just so familiar, and it's not that funny. It has a couple of moments here and there that I laughed, and it's got a couple of moments where they're trying to develop the characters a little bit more, but it just ends up falling flat. It's not funny enough, and it's really just seems patched together from other better films, including other better films from Amy Schumer,
right?
Who, again, is very talented and very funny. And like you said, Jillian Bell.
Yes.
Love her.
Love her.
It should be better than this.
It should.
I wanted it to be better than this. I did. But, it's on Netflix. So as we always say, if you have it, there's a couple of laughs there, a couple of laughs. But unfortunately,
not
too many. Yeah, and that's on Netflix now, and it's called Kinda Pregnant. Okay, looking ahead to next week, Schlocketeer off this week. So looking ahead to next week, the next round of the MCU, Captain America Brave New World, comes out next week.
Also, the new Paddington film, Paddington in Peru.
Paddington in Peru. What kind of shenanigans is he going to get into? Also, one called Armand.
One called Rounding.
Sly Lives or Sly Lives?
Sly Lives. It's a Sly and the Family Stone documentary.
Nice.
Yes.
I'm in.
And then Something is About to Happen.
One called Time Stalker.
And The Dead Thing.
Okay, but that's next week. What about this week? There's some Oscar nominees. There's some documentaries. Amy Schumer. What do you think? We can always keep the conversation going and talk movies anytime. You can find us easily. Mad Wolf Columbus on all these social sites and the main website. We can find all the written reviews and more. That's at madwolf.com. So love it if you could keep in touch. Have a great week. Be well, because, man, the flu is everywhere.
Yeesh.
And we'll talk soon. Until then, she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Screening Room Podcast.
See ya.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.